tend to look at trees. I love trees. I've always loved big trees, and so I've always been kind of curious that there's history here in the island, and there's some remnants probably of trees that were here before we were here, before the white man showed up. And so I cornered Tom sometime in January. I said, Tom, I got an idea. I'd love to do something for the Historical Society, not necessarily doing a presentation tonight, but about big trees on the island, and make it sort of a two-way street, because everybody here probably says, I know where a big tree is, right? And so we roped Ian Woofington into it, and he and I spent 3 afternoons crawling around the island, because he had some trees and I had some trees, and I'm fairly certain, I don't think I went on anybody's property that I wasn't supposed to, but we'll find out tonight, maybe. Yeah. So, that being said, what we decided to do was, there is something called the AFP, something like that. It's a way that you calculate champion trees, and it's a point total, and it's based on the diameter of a tree at 4-foot breast height, the crown spread of a tree, and its height. And then they attach different point totals to those. I think it's 4 points times each inch of diameter, something like that. And it's, you know, the grand champions are oftentimes huge trees, or actually big examples of small trees. And we actually have one here on the island that is an American champion, which you guys probably already know about, the beech tree down there on Beech Tree Lane. At any rate, so Ian and I had these ideas, and so we, boom, off into the woods we went. So the first place we went, photo is needed here. So, you know, I live up here, and this area was hammered by, as you guys know, one of the areas that was hammered by the storm, right? But it was very selective, it seemed like, because Forest Lane, there's a lot of trees there that didn't seem to be hit. But my property and several other properties were, you know, as Fred said, cycloned off. So I said, I think there's a really nice fir tree just down Clark. It was 5.5 feet in diameter. Okay? So that's a pretty good size fir tree. And it's funny because you get up close, and you get right up here, you go, that's a big tree. So then, he said, I know where a bigger tree is. And I said, all right. So I'm going to point roughly where it is, so people, it's going to sort of be in this neck of the woods here. And so, again, this is early February, late January, and it's wet. And we're getting wetter by the moment. By the end of this day, my pants were wet, my feet were wet. We tromped through the woods, and Ian's like, I don't have very good vision. And I think it's around here somewhere, and I was like, that has to be it. And so we walked up to it, and that is 87 inches in diameter. A Doug fir. Now what's cool about that is, you guys know that as you're driving on Highway 20, the Chamber of Commerce little park there, and they've got a big section of fir, right? And that is, I think, almost 8 feet in diameter, and they estimate that is 600 and some odd years old, because you can count the rings. So I don't know, this seems, I would think this would be at least 300 years old. But I don't know, other guys here might know more than me, but that seems like that's pretty cool. We have a fir tree on the island that is 7 feet in diameter. So, then we're walking along, and I spot a spruce tree. There's not a lot of spruce here on the island. And I thought, well, as long as we're here, let's measure this, and there might be other ones out there. This one looks like a pretty nice one. The funny part about these trees are that they have a bit of a base swell to them, And so how do you measure the tree? Do we measure it from down here or up here? And so we came up with an idea we both agreed common, like, how's this look? This looks about right, so sort of roughly from this height. Spruce is a tree that would be highly valued for how strong a wood it is, but you'd find it mostly in really wet areas, like the coast mountains, right? That's where the grand big spruce grow. So who knows how old this was? Who knows why they didn't take it? Maybe it wasn't that big at the time that they were cutting trees down and they let it there. I don't know. It's in the same neck of the woods there. So then, you guys know this tree. It's right by the side of the road. Agnes Ashback's red cedar. And you drive by and you go, that's a pretty good sized tree. But not until you get up to it that you realize that is, what is that, almost 7 feet diameter. Wow. And it's got a couple blown out tops, but it's a pretty intact tree all the way up. And again, the road went right by it, so I don't know why that didn't get cut down. And it seems extremely healthy. I'm very happy. So it's right, and you could just walk up and give it a pet if you want. I happen to love that tree. So this was Tom's suggestion. This is Pheasant Run, sort of up in this neck of the woods. And he said there's a really cool big leaf maple here that is got fantastic branches. Now, I don't think this is the biggest diameter. I'm sure it's not. But it is a spectacular example of what a big leaf maple does. The crown is probably close to 100 feet in diameter, and those branches are beautifully sculpted. It's really a magnificent maple. So he said, and it's what's so fun about doing this with somebody else who's into trees. He's like, I know another tree right 100 yards from here. So this is a Pacific Madrona. And those, some folks might know more than I do about these particular trees. I don't know how long they grow in really rocky areas, shorelines. They can take a lot of salt. A lot of them seem to be, this one was a particularly healthy one. It really looked healthy. And, 3 feet in diameter, that's, you don't see that many madrone trees that big. And again, it looks like it's just getting started, which is kind of cool. This one had, and this happens a lot, where do you measure it? Because you start having stems coming off of them, right? So you have to kind of stick with the 4-foot breast height, otherwise, you get into interpretations.
So where's that one located?
So that's right, again, Pheasant Run, here. It goes up, Kevin and Holly are up here. It's sort of right in that neck of the woods. Okay? And now I'm going to ask you guys for your suggestions about trees, because I'd like to know, because we want this, the idea was to get this started and saying, hey, I have a tree I think you might want to measure. Because that did happen to us. So this is, I'll go ahead and tell you where this is. The house that burned down on Clark Point. Obviously nobody there, so we go for a walk there from time to time. And there's a hemlock that is on the slope that the top has been blown out. But hemlocks grow really slowly. The rings, at least the ones I've seen cut down, are really narrow. And there was one that had blown across Clark Point about here. It was on Mark Lindeman's property, but it came across Clark Point. So I chopped it up because I want the fire department to be able to get to Steve and Jody's house. And so I chopped, took it off the road, and it was only about this big around. It was 126 years old. So it'd come off of this Forest Lane section of woods here that are really quite spectacular, that are probably second growth maybe, but 126 years old. That's 1895, something like that. I mean, so right when they were doing some logging, so that probably was this tall. And, so that is 5.5 feet in diameter. So that's not this big, that is this big, right? So I'm estimating that has to at least be 200 years old or older. Again, that is probably 4 feet thick, 80 feet up. It's this big stout hemlock. And then the top of it has regrown, so even though it's been blown out, it's all happy and just, you know, I think the fire didn't seem to damage it at all. So this day, we were at it for 4 hours. We kept saying, well, I know a tree, and I know a tree. So this is this cottonwood. This is on a property that my wife and I used to own, Mickey, over here, right here. And it's very wet in here, as you guys know. And that has an eagle's nest in it. And I remember going up to look at it. This tree has always been amazing to me. And going up there one time, walking around, there was a half a seagull at the base of the tree. So, one year Mickey and I were in the yard, and the eagle comes flying through the yard. He drops his salmon right in our yard. So we had to put our dog in, and we sat there and watched, and the eagle was just sitting up in the tree and waiting and figuring out, like, he or she had to swoop down to get it. They couldn't just land on it and try to fly. So for 45 minutes it just sat there, and finally it swooped down and went up through the woods into the tree. But that is 91 inches in diameter, so that's 7.5 feet. I mean, I look big there, but I'm dwarfed by that thing, right? What's interesting about that is it's wet all the way around here. Okay, this is very wet. When you know how wet it is back in there.
Now, is it a cottonwood?
Yeah. Yep.
So how did you measure the diameter? I missed that part.
Roughly 4 feet up, and that first day we had a tape that Ian had taped together. It was three 10-foot sections, right? Well, we didn't have enough sections. Subsequently, somebody has given us to use, and I should have brought it tonight, a cruising, which has inches on one side and then the diameter calculation on the other side, and it's a big tape, so we were able to get everything around. But in this particular time, we had to stand there and then stick our finger in there and hop over and do it again. Like the pioneers, exactly. I suspect, from what I've heard, if you chop down a cottonwood, it'll just start sprouting water. They just are water suckers. So we have that property has several other large ones, but that one, I think, is probably darn near the biggest on the island. But Adam says he has a big one back in his place. And the back side of his place is kind of wet too, so maybe there is. So we went from big to little, okay? So Ian said, I know where there's a yew tree on the island, and I said, well, excellent. You don't see those. Those are trees, but they're not trees. They're sort of shrubby. They get maybe 30, 40, I don't know, maybe they get taller than that. They are, in England, yew trees were planted in graveyards, Druid times, because of how old they are, or they live to. So in English graveyards, you will see oftentimes a large yew tree. And they live for thousands of years. They are a very long-lived tree. They were also the tree that the English archers made their bows out of yew wood, and that revolutionized warfare in the middle part of the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries. The ability to shoot an arrow 600 yards and have them rain down. They used yew trees. This one's not very big, but we thought it was awfully cute. That one is up here in the hideaway. Okay. So there's a little road here called Chestnut Lane, and that's that. There's a red house there, you guys know it, I'm sure, you drive by it all the time. And I think his name is Tony, okay? We drove up and, I try to be real friendly and, hey, we're just out and about looking at trees, do you mind if we quickly take a measurement of your tree? And he's like, sure, and turned out Ian had cut that, or trimmed it, because it was growing over the guy's house, and you can't really tell, it's grown back. We wrote horse chestnut. I think we'll have to come back in the fall to see if there are horse chestnuts or what kind of chestnut it is. But it's a really nice example, and it's very gnarly, and it seems very happy. So again, that little fellow is right here. So this is on the old McEachran property. It's now this section right here. And you'll see it when you drive down, then you're right by Don and Bud's, look across the street, and you'll see this nice spruce tree sitting there. And it's a really nice example. It's actually the same size as the other one that I was standing next to. This is grown out in the open though, so it's a lot more branches, and the other one in the forest was straight up, just a solid column of wood. Again, why this one was spared, probably, I'm sure it was logged around that area at the time, and by that time maybe it was only this big around, and they spared it, and subsequent owners never cut it down, and slowly, got to that size. But I think that one could be vulnerable to one of those Fraser River winds coming out of, right? I mean, it's coming right off of the water there. So, we thought we should gotta make sure we get an alder somehow. And we have a lot of alder in the island, right? So, this one is on Lervik, and we were looking for another tree. It was a willow, I think, and somebody, was it you had maybe said, somebody had said,
yeah, I talked.
Willow down on Lervik.
Yeah.
And we drove around, and you'll have to help us look, because we found something that had been pollarded. You know what that means, folks? Mm-hmm. Where you cut all the branches off and it comes back again, like sprouts, and then, the English would do that with oak trees, and they would cut them down and sprout them back up again, and then 15 years later cut them again, and that, good source of firewood that way. At any rate, this is growing across the street, like 20 feet away is a little cabin. This thing, I am sure, has heart rot. We think this thing is destined to go down. And, Ian's cut down a lot of trees, and we were looking up at it, and he's like, I don't know how he's going to get that thing out of there. I think nature will just do it. But alders probably live maybe 100 years. They're pretty short-lived. They tend to grow where there's been a disturbance, and they're the pioneer tree that comes back in first. And so big swaths of our island have lots of alder because after all these storms, nobody planted. Again, some people didn't plant, and what grew up is alder, and that's like, for example, what we have a lot of on our property. But that's,
Does somebody know, is it a legume and it puts nitrogen in the soil?
I don't know. It does put nitrogen in the soil, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a legume. I think.
Well, leguminous families,
Yeah.
all the plants that fix nitrogen.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can answer that, Bob, for you, because I don't know. It does, and that's one of its great, why it's a great pioneering species, because you've got soil disturbance and trees, you maybe depleted the soil somehow, and they come in there and immediately start fixing nitrogen.
Where is Lervick Lane?
So Lervick is right here, this little, so there's a road end, although I don't know if it's a road end, I don't think technically it is, but we all on the island seem to treat it like it is, so. And so this is probably right here on the slope that goes up right here, and there's a lot of water coming off of that. And again, I would be nervous if I had a.
Is it at the top of the slope?
No, it's at the bottom. It's right down almost towards Bubbles' house. Okay.
It's right behind the Torkelsons.
Maybe the Torkelsons.
And that used to be the Bob Post house, I know, anyway.
Okay.
And it's wet, really wet there, and you
Yeah.
can see part of the water system shed up there. When I was a kid, I lived down there, and we had a pickle barrel sitting on the hill up there, and the water ran, they had a pipe come out of the side hill where it ran, and that was our water for years.
No kidding. Yeah.
And
Jimmy, was that tree there when you were,
oh, it's good water.
Jimmy, was that tree there when you were a kid?
Well, back and on. No, it was not quite that far, but anyway, I lived there in the summertime with, matter of fact, I spent one summer in Bubbles there. I never called her that, but it was, we always called
Miss
her
Bubbles.
Henry. And she had a log cabin just right across from that.
Okay.
A big one, and I spent one summer when I was working town that I lived in. She had a room upstairs that I lived in. I'd known her, or knew her for near all my life. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, so this willow that he was mentioning, they love water too, and like you said, the water was just sprouting out the hillside.
But the maple come up, well, some of you know, I had I bought some property and had it logged years ago, and then I reforested it. And for the first 4 or 5 years, I was up there months at a time with a brush cutter cutting the alder. It just starts growing immediately.
Yeah.
If you clear an area and don't take care of it real quick, it'll just be buried in alder.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in 10 years, you could have a 20-foot
Yeah, they got.
alder, and Doug fir like a lot of sun.
Yeah,
Grand firs and hemlocks can handle shade for a long time. In fact, those are, the hemlocks are what's called a climax tree, meaning that that's the last, if the forest hasn't been disturbed, that's the one that will eventually take over and be there. Because they can grow underneath trees for years and years and years, whereas Doug firs are like, screw it, I'm dead. And so if you are planting, you'd want to, stay on top of that, because
Yeah.
otherwise,
so the fir trees that I had planted would come up as a kind of, for a while, alder was bringing more money than fir, and I thought, all these thousands of alder trees. But anyway, but I don't like, I'm not very fond of alder.
yeah. It does split easy though, that's for sure. So then I said to Ian, I know on the way to Forest Lane, right by the resort, as you go down the hill, right here and right there, right here's a a Doug fir. Let's measure that. And it actually has it has evidence of a big fire scar on it. And again, it's sort of it's deceptive because it has a blown out top, so I'm sure that was blown out in the 1990 storm. And but it's slowly regrowing parts of that top. It's fairly stout all the way up to that, probably 100 feet up at least. And what is that, 5.5 feet in diameter. So still, I imagine, well, one of the things I want to do is also have us go measure stumps. Because we all have stumps here in the island, right? Especially the ones that, the old ones that they used to have springboard notches stuck in the sides of them, right? And you can see that even the old big stumps, there's not very many trees that were bigger than this that were taken off the island. I mean, you don't see stumps that are the size you'd see in the Olympic forest, for example. And I think that's a function of a couple of things. We only get 28 inches of rain here a year, right? So we don't get a ton of rain for that kind of rapid growth. And it's rocky soil. And so trees would oftentimes tip over before they could get that big. So, but I would like, I'm throwing this out to you guys, because probably there's some stumps here that'll be fun to measure. We were talking that if they are under 100 years old, they're going to be intact, and they're going to be, we can probably get a rough estimate of how big they are. And the cool ones are the ones that have trees that are this big around growing out the top of them. So we got a phone call, or no, actually it was on Facebook. You guys have been really good about giving us tips on Facebook. So this is Loa Linda. You guys, yeah. You guys called us and we went, okay, we'll come over. And that was the day it had snowed. And sure enough, this is a really nice cedar tree. And it's really nice a long way up. I mean, it's a beautiful example. You notice here the buttressing, the classic cedar trees, they end up with these buttresses that go all the way around. And as that gets older, that'll get even more buttressed. That one seems to be extremely healthy, and you guys are taking excellent care of it.
Tossing it like a hawk.
And then you said, we think a really nice oak tree, and then we looked up and said, I think that's a maple.
Yeah, sorry.
But no, you never know. And as long as we're here, let's take the tape out. We took the tape out, and it's 44 inches in diameter, so it's not a super big one, but it's, again, super healthy. It has 2 stems coming up out of it. And we have some maples like that kind of around our house, and I get nervous because those things tend to just shatter all of a sudden, and a shard this big around with a point on it will just come down and hit our garage.
Yeah, we got one this year after the big windstorm.
Did you?
Yeah, do a little patching on the roof.
Yeah, yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll say that was up, down over in this area, okay? And they have a mystery conifer. Now I think that might have been a spruce. So there's we took a pine cone here.
A spruce cone.
A spruce, well, yeah, I didn't know. I was like, well, let's go find out, I don't want to climb up it, but it was a really nice looking tree, and it looked like they had planted it.
Well, Audrey White was known for being a good master gardener, so it wouldn't have surprised me. Maybe she planted something unusual there.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to find out exactly what it is, because it's a really nice tree, and it was distinctive. You had all this native stuff, and all of a sudden, like, that looks like that was intentional. And I'm starting to look cold, by the way. So, I know, I've heard of this tree, everybody's heard of this tree, it's in the Champions of Washington State book. It's actually, again, remember I mentioned about how they do points? So, these listings oftentimes have the beech tree with the largest crown, the beech tree with the tallest one, and the one that has the biggest base. And this one, I think, combination of factors made it the champion. Look at that crown, right? It's spectacular. It's completely intact all the way around. And Ian had to walk all the way back there to take a photograph of this. You can't even see me. I'm, way over here. Look at that. There's me. There's the tree. And it feels like it's almost half an acre. So,
National champion.
yes, it's a national champion. So, I don't know if anybody knows what a baobab looks like, but I think it has characteristics of that trunk here. And I was like, I've known about this tree, I've seen it, but I've never been up close to it. When I got close to it, I was like, holy cow, that is a huge stemmed tree. I mean, that base was really impressive.
Where is it?
Well, that's on Beech Tree Lane. I know, they're so clever. Right there, Beech Tree Lane. You go down, and there it is.
You can see it from the ferry.
Yeah, you can see it from the ferry. I don't know whose property is that?
I'm not sure who they
Well,
are.
it used to be Benja's stores.
Okay.
It needs a plaque, so nobody will cut it down.
Yeah, we need to maybe have people sponsoring it, like a little. Brought to you by Dave's Insurance Company.
A little history, that tree was planted by the
Benja's door?
Blackington family.
Really?
And I have a photograph that I'm pretty sure is that tree at about 12 years old.
Oh, get out. That's fantastic.
With Mrs. Benja's.
So when do you think that would have been? 1880s, 1890s?
Well, when we moved here, the word was it's 100 years old. And we've been here 40 years.
But you're 100 years old.
So, but the other thing is that on the other side, a branch blew off near the base, off of the base kind of.
Yeah.
And it was like 3 feet in diameter.
Yeah, it's right behind here. And and I'm looking at it going, holy cow, that is huge.
Yep.
So, interesting. And it doesn't look like it's in any dire shape. I mean, it looks very happy.